Good afternoon. The time is now 2 o'clock. I call to order the August 5th, 2019 Executive Committee meeting of the Contractors State License Board. I'm Johnny Simpson, the Board Chair and Executive Committee Chair. Only the Executive Committee is meeting. The focus of this meeting is to discuss our budget expenditures and increasing revenue. Tomorrow, the Licensing and Legislative Committee's meeting will be held. Wow, that was quick. That's okay. At the Employment Development Department Auditorium located at 722 Capitol Mall in Sacramento. Only board members who are members of the committee may sit at the table. Other board members who are in attendance must observe from the audience. If a quorum of the board is present, those members observing cannot participate in the discussion. Felice, can you please call the roll?
Johnny Simpson.
Quorum.
Johnny Simpson.
Here.
David Torre.
Here.
Susan Granzella. Here. Marlo Richardson has an excused absence. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to invite the committee members to introduce themselves, starting on my right.
David Foe, Registrar.
Susan Granzella, Board Member.
Tanya Corcoran, Chief Deputy Registrar.
Stacy Paul, Budget.
Felice Jones, Executive Staff.
Christy Shields, Counsel for the Board.
David Del Torre, Board Member.
Thank you. Agenda item B, our public comment section. This item is provided for public comment pertaining to items not on the agenda. To allow this committee enough time to conduct its full schedule of business, I will be limiting public comment to 3 minutes apiece. Please note that state law prohibits committee members from discussing any matter brought up during public comment. This is not listed on today's agenda. We're also not allowed to act on any items not on the agenda. If you want the committee to discuss a topic not on the agenda, you can ask us to consider placing that issue on an agenda for a future meeting. If you have an application, complaint, or disciplinary charges pending before the board, we ask that you not discuss the details of your case or pending complaint. Committee members are not permitted to receive evidence or information that is not part of the administrative record in the case. Please be aware that this will not be the public's only opportunity to make a comment during this meeting. If your comments are related to a specific agenda item, you can make your comments now, but you may want to wait until that item comes up for discussion. We will be sure to ask for public comment. Is there any comment at this time? Do any of the committee members have anything to place on a future agenda meeting item? No? Okay. Then let's go to agenda item C of your packet. Staff presentation and discussion regarding CSLB's budget and fund condition. I will turn it over to our budget manager, Stacy Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. So the budget overview begins on page 9. I first want to explain that CSBA is a special fund entity funded from application licensing and renewal fees combined with fines and penalties. This means that there's no general fund support. Back in July 2017, we implemented a fee increase in hopes to stabilize the fund to bring in $5 million more in revenue. However, as you can see from the first chart on page 9, that didn't work out as planned, and we've expended almost $3 million more than we're bringing in. This is mainly due to costs that were unforeseeable or non-existent when the fee increase was proposed. CSLB is also seeing a decline in our licensing population. Since 2001, our licensed population has dropped 6.6%, from 305,000 to 285,000. This result is a revenue loss of millions per year. For instance, in 2018-19, we saw a 3% decline in license renewals, which equates to a revenue loss of about $2 million. If you flip the page, the most significant costs that increased since 16-17 are outlined in the following areas. $4.5 million in personal services dollars. This is mainly due to staff wages increases and additional staff due to legislative BCPs. Another $1.5 million in external statewide cost. These have to do with mandatory external costs beyond CSLB's control that are issued by various control agencies, like the Department of Finance, State Controller's Office, et cetera. Another $1.2 million in higher enforcement costs, mainly due to the AG and the Office of Administrative Hearings, and $1 million in operating expenses. This mainly is attributed to IT security costs that are expected to continue to rise annually. Within the chart on page 10 shows the CSLB expenditures projected for fiscal year 19-20. These costs include the following forecasted increases. Increases to salary and benefits for all staff based on collective bargaining unit agreements for this and future years is included in the personal services category. Also effective September 1, 2019, AG's office has raised their billing rates. See letters on page 12 and 13 explain the fee increases. CSLB is projecting a 50% increase or approximately $3 million more annually to the AG cost due to this drastic rate increase implemented by the AG. And lastly, CSLB has seen a rise in the Department of Information Technology cost. Currently, $1.1 million of these costs are expected to continue in future years as we increase online application submittals and for necessary IT technology support and security. As a result of the revenue loss and higher costs of doing business, CSLB is back in the same structural balance or budget imbalance situation. This is resulting in CSLB using its reserve faster than anticipated. If these costs continue without being fiscally responsible and cutting back and a fee increase, CSLB will have insignificant available funds for ongoing operations by the beginning of fiscal year 2021. Are there any questions?
Not seeing any. This is an informational item. No proposed action is required from the committee at this time. Is there any committee discussion on this item? Not seeing any. Is there any public discussion on this item? Susan.
I do have a question. For those of us who understand it's a fluctuating thing, can you describe the services that are so critical to what we're here for, that what the AG's office provides us for CSLB? That would be helpful. Put some context around it.
Absolutely. Per statute, the Office of the Attorney General is the prosecutor of our administrative cases. So there's a number of services they actually provide, but the number one service is that if we take an administrative action against a licensed contractor or somebody that's unlicensed, they have the right to appeal that action through the Administrative Procedures Act. And by law, the Attorney General's office represents us. They put on the case in the administrative hearing forum. They also assist us with other matters. In the event that we're sued by a member of the public, they would defend that through, like it's a tort action, to defend our position in that civil lawsuit. They also represent us with our cash deposits. And just to give you an example of something that the board has been very helpful with, and that is sponsoring legislation that will preclude licensees from filing a cash deposit, because we're looking very closely at the Attorney General expenses, and we've spent up to $20,000 on a cash deposit of $15,000. So not a real good use of our resources. But again, they provide the legal representation in disciplinary matters. Internally, we're very fortunate to have Christy Shield in the department's legal office. So.
Okay. Thank you. And the matters over which the control or the budget and the expenditures are many times out of our hands. That's what I was.
Sure. Well, one thing that happened approximately 18 months ago is that the Attorney General's office took the position that we didn't have the statutory authority to settle licensee citations, something we've been doing for many years. And when we lost that authority to settle a licensee citation without having it proceed to an administrative hearing, they took on that role. They took those cases on, and that increased our legal action costs by 50% for licensees. So it's something we're going to talk a little bit more about as far as strategies that we want to implement. But our line item for the Attorney General's office last fiscal year was approximately $6 million, and that's what they spent. So if we're mandated, and our goal is to protect consumers, and if we have a licensee that has committed an egregious act and that license should be revoked, that would be our priority, and the Attorney General's office would draft that accusation and be the one to prosecute that accusation.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Beginning on page, let's move on to item D. Beginning on page 17 is the strategies to reduce budget expenditures and increase revenue. Senior staff members met and developed actions for each division to reduce expenditures and increase revenue. It is important that we remain vigilant in monitoring our budget expenditures and resources. We have an obligation to the state, our licensees, and California consumers. I will now ask the Registrar, David Fote, to present to the committee.
Thank you, Chair Simpson. So on page 17 at the top of the page, we have looked at what we could do to reduce expenditures for our administrative division and purchases, and there are certain things that we can do to tighten our belts. Look at our contracts as an example, other contracts that maybe we don't need to enter into that could be delayed. Tanya Corcoran's taking the lead in reviewing those contracts, looking at the printers the supervisors have. It's not a lot of money, but you can reduce expenditures by eliminating the service agreements and the individual printing cartridges for printers if they have to use the shared printer in the office. So just some things that take a look at on the administrative function that we can reduce expenditures for. For licensing, you'll see that the proposal was put forth to charge a $20 fee to do a business name change. We get a lot of business names requests. We do want to make sure the business name it does comply with the license classification, so it does take staff time. Currently, that's a free process that we offer. Perhaps we should charge $20. That would take legislation. What's perhaps the most important, though, is the development of a possible remodeling and home improvement license classification. That is something that the licensing committee will address tomorrow. We'll consider if that was to occur. That could increase our license population, which would be helpful to our revenue stream. The next one was a proposal to outsource our examinations and not have our existing staff conduct those examinations. And this is something that we'll talk about more in the licensing committee. That may be something that will be delayed, and our licensing chief, Justin Paddock, will provide more information on that tomorrow. We have froze an AGPA position. That's an associate government program analyst position, the testing unit that we won't be filling in the short term. That could save up to $110,000. For public affairs, the public affairs staff, they're with us today. They got together and they're going to change their message a little bit. We've had a real strong focus on consumer protection. What can we do, though, to provide additional information to our licensees so our licensees understand the value of being licensed? So, they're encouraged to, one, renew their license, but also applicants or unlicensed people are encouraged to obtain a license. So that would be about bringing value to the license, maybe having webinars, helping our licensees to remain compliant with existing laws. We're pretty excited about that. But also looking at our travel expenditures. Perhaps we'll have to redirect some enforcement staff to take on some of the outreach opportunities so that we're not incurring lodging and travel expenses. For enforcement, talked previously about our accusations. I have had a meeting with the statewide supervisor for the Attorney General's office about our Attorney General expenditures. What can we do to keep them in check? And as I mentioned earlier, we reached the conclusion that we really should have a focus on the accusations, which are the most important consumer protection tool because it can result in the revocation of the license. But what do we do about the citations that are pending? The reality right now is we have more than 900 legal actions that are pending at the Attorney General's office. If they were all to go to hearing, we simply couldn't afford it. An appeal for a citation is $9,800, so round it off to $10,000, if you do the math, that would be almost $10 million worth of work. And so we're going to have to take a look at what's currently pending. We need to relook at how we're assessing discipline. We certainly want to take action when appropriate. But now that we have the authority to issue a letter of admonishment, that's a very effective tool to gain future compliance for someone that's committed a relatively, not a real serious offense. How can we use that more often? The benefit of the letter of admonishment is the appeals are handled internally. We talked about where the AG has to represent us is with a disciplinary action that falls within the Administrative Procedures Act. The letter of admonishment does not fall within the Administrative Procedures Act. We can handle those appeals internally, provides for 1-year disclosure on the license. We think that can be a very effective tool. We also now have regained the authority to conduct the settlement conferences. We're calling them more of an informal settlement conference, but really taking a hard look at resolving those citations before it's sent to the Attorney General's office, something we were very effective in doing for many years prior to determining that we should be sending those to the Attorney General until we have clear legislative authority. So we're excited about that. We want to take a look at our civil penalties and the assessments. We do have a pattern where administrative law judges are reducing civil penalties, perhaps more than we would like. We need to meet with the Office of Administrative Hearings and talk about and explain to them how we do take steps to gain compliance many times before issuing a citation, but when we issue a citation, it's for something we believe is serious and the civil penalty should be supported. When they take us to hearing and it costs us, again, $9,800 and our civil penalty is reduced to a few $100s, it's not a good business model and it's not protecting our licensees that are playing by the rules. So we need to take a real focus on that. We need to look at workers' compensation insurance violations. If you're unlicensed, the penalty for being an unlicensed employer is $15,000, but for a licensee, it's $5,000. We'd like to take a look at raising that civil penalty ceiling to perhaps $15,000. What can we do, though, with the Enforcement Committee's consideration? So what I've just talked about are things that are ideas that we have begun to put in place, but we believe that the Enforcement Committee needs to address a few other avenues that could reduce expenditures, and one would be to cap the Attorney General's expenses at $6 million. We had a line item last year to spend $6 million. We spent $6 million. There's a letter in here from the Attorney General's office indicating that as of September 1st, the hourly fee for a Deputy Attorney General is going to increase by 30%, for a paralegal 80%. So what that is, the 50% increase and the line item for the Attorney General's line item. So if it was $6 million last fiscal year, it would be $9 million next fiscal year. We don't have an additional $3 million to pay for legal action expenses, so we have to work very closely with the Attorney General's office to cap those expenses at $6 million. And that would be something the Enforcement Committee will be asked to consider. We also, in order to, the goal is to stay in the black this year, to not spend more than we're receiving in revenue, so we will likely have to delay filling of enforcement positions. And that would be something that we'll again ask the Enforcement Committee to consider. We said freeze here. I'm looking at more of just more of a delay. We've been very effective in filling vacant positions. For many of you that have been on the board for a number of years know that we would generally have 30 to 40 vacancies. Last time, I think Mike Maliza reported, we were below 20. So we have been filling positions very quickly. We may want to delay freezing them, or delay filling them, I'm sorry. And one area we might want to look at is proactive enforcement. We may need to delay filling some proactive enforcement positions so we can continue to prioritize the consumer complaints. But again, that's something the Enforcement Committee will need to look at. And one thing the board did, I think it was back in 2006, when we had a hiring freeze and couldn't effectively manage the workload that we had, the board said, well, if there's a financial injury of less than $5,000 and you're unable to settle that through your intake mediation program, perhaps that consumer will need to go to small claims court for redress instead of sending that out for field investigation. And also taking a look at what we call our misuse of fund cases, where you have a subcontractor or material supplier filing against a prime contractor. They may need to use civil remedies, because if we're not able to fill enforcement positions, we're not going to be able to manage the 15,000 complaints that we receive every year. And that's really the message that I want industry to hear. I believe we've had a model enforcement program, and we want to continue to have a model enforcement program, but if we're unable to maintain our staffing levels, then we're going to have to stop doing something we currently are performing. And I don't believe that it should be licensing, because that's where the revenue is brought in. But what we need to look at then is what in enforcement can we cut back on until such time as we have the revenue to fund all of our programs. So that would be my conclusion for that, or my summary of that agenda item. Is there any questions?
Seeing none, thank you. This is an informational item. No proposed action is required from the committee at this time. Do we have any other comments from the committee? From the public? Okay, let's move on to agenda item E on page 23. Is the fee increase proposal. Today we have discussed the budget and fund condition, which included a summary of ongoing increased cost in statewide operating expenses and significant increases in the Attorney General's office billing rates, which staff estimates at $3 million annually. Additionally, we have reviewed the staff plan to reduce expenditures and increase revenue. While I commend the registrar for taking immediate action to mitigate cost, it is clear to me that fee increase is necessary to ensure we continue to meet our consumer protection mandate. Today, the committee is being asked to consider making a recommendation to the full board on proposed fee increases. Staff have noted 3 options, which range from 14% to 25%. I will now ask Stacy Paul to discuss this for us.
Thank you. So the chart begins on page 23, and it identifies each fee along with the current and proposed increases. The first column is the current fees. The next column is this: by regulation, CSLB can raise the fees to the statutory maximum cap, which is approximately 14%. This would generate about $8 million more annually. However, this option would not generate enough revenue to support ongoing operations. The next column is through legislation, and it's a 20% increase. It would generate an estimated $13 million more annually, only giving the board enough revenue for 3 years. The last column is where CSLB feels that the third column is the best option, which is also through legislation, to increase fees by the dollar amount identified by 20 to 25%. This proposal would generate $16 million more annually, effective January 2021, if approved, to ensure CSLB is solvent for a stable reserve for the foreseeable future, while continuing to fulfill its mission to protect consumers by licensing and enforcing the construction industry.
Thank you. I'll take comments from any board members.
So I have a question. Are these all the fees? I don't think I've ever counted how many there are, but these are all of the fees where we are allowed to make changes?
These are the fees for application and renewals. Yes. Yeah.
Is there any public comment? Seeing none, the staff recommendation is to approve fees by 20 to 25%. I would like to clarify the recommendation. It is to increase fees as specified on page 23. This is the last column on the right, titled 20 to 25%. That equates to a projected $16 million. The recommendation is to approve the proposed fees specified in this column. For example, the original application, exam or waiver, will be $400. The initial license fee will be $250, and so on down the full column, which ends with the HIS delinquent renewal fee, set at $150. We should also consider increasing the renewal fee to the statutory maximum through the regulatory process while any legislative proposal is pending to further increase fees. Do I have a motion that the Executive Committee direct staff to develop a legislative proposal to set the fee as specified on page 23 under the column titled 20 to 25%, which projects annual revenue of $16 million, and to seek an author to carry the legislative proposal. In addition, direct staff to develop a regulatory proposal to present to the board for increasing renewal fees to the statutory maximum to address the board's structural budget imbalance while the legislative proposal is pending. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any board comment? Is there any public comment? Felice, can you take the roll, please?
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
David Delatorre.
Aye.
Susan Granzella. Motion passes.
Thank you. This concludes our agenda items. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any public comment? Seeing none, take the roll.
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
David Delatorre.
Aye.
Susan Granzella. We are adjourned.